Hey there. Ready to explore something really cool?
Always up for an adventure.
Today we're diving into the art of detachment.
That sounds intriguing.
And we've got some really fascinating source material to work with. So it's actually recordings from a seminar called Mind and Movement at the Vori International Headquarters in Carlsbad, California.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It took place just last month, November 2024.
Very cool.
And the speaker is Ron W Rathbun with some additional commentary from Daniel and Taylor.
I'm intrigued already.
And Daniel's a medical doctor.
Okay.
And Taylor's a professional surfer.
Oh, wow. What a mix.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting combination of perspectives, and the energy in the room was electric.
Oh, I bet. Especially with a topic like detachment, and I'm always eager to learn more about it.
Me too. And it's funny because the word itself can sound a bit intimidating.
It can, yeah.
Like maybe a bit cold or something.
Yeah, it's got this kind of like hands-off vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't care.
Like,
but when you really dive into it, it's anything but.
Exactly.
And Ron really emphasizes this in the seminar. He's been teaching this stuff for almost 40 years, since 1985 to be exact.
Wow.
So there's a depth of knowledge there that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And, what's even more fascinating is how Ron's own story is intertwined with this ancient wisdom.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so imagine this, right? Author Ron W Rathbun finds healing and transformation through detachment.
Wow.
Tapping into this lineage of wisdom that, get this, predates even Buddha.
Wow, that's amazing.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of these practices.
Yeah.
And what's intriguing is that Ron doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. He actually credits detachment with him exceeding his wildest dreams.
And achieving a state of bliss, similar to what's described in these ancient Buddhist texts.
That's incredible.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Sure.
let's just break down what detachment actually means.
Okay.
Because let's face it, the word itself can sound a bit intimidating, maybe even a bit cold.
It's understandable to have that initial reaction.
Yeah.
But Ron's approach is anything but cold.
Okay.
He describes detachment as this practice of becoming aware of our minds and learning to choose how we respond to the world around us.
Okay.
It's not about denying our emotions or becoming indifferent.
Okay.
It's about finding a space between ourselves and those emotions so we can experience them without being overwhelmed by them.
So it's less about suppressing our feelings and more about managing them in a healthier way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ron uses this really vivid analogy.
I love a good analogy.
Me too.
Okay, so he describes our conscious awareness as constantly touching the world, absorbing its energy, like a sponge.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever noticed how being around someone in a bad mood can, bring your own energy down?
Oh, totally. It's like their negativity is contagious.
Precisely. And Ron's point is that we're constantly absorbing these energies, both positive and negative, without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Detachment is about becoming aware of that process.
Okay.
And learning to control what we allow into our mental and emotional space.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be really useful in everyday life.
Yeah.
But how do we actually go about controlling what we absorb?
That's where the concept of the Kelee comes in.
The Kelee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ron describes it as this inner space where we store all of our unprocessed emotions and experiences.
Okay.
Kind of like compartments in a filing cabinet.
So every time we have a negative experience or an unresolved emotion, it gets filed away in one of these compartments. What happens to those emotions then? Do they just sit there?
Well, according to Ron, these compartments don't just sit there passively. They actually drain our energy.
Really?
And can trigger negative reactions without us even realizing it.
Yeah.
It's like they're operating in the background, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So it's like having all these unresolved issues weighing us down,
Yeah.
even if we're not consciously thinking about them.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this is where the connection to physical health becomes really interesting.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So one of the seminar participants, Daniel, is a medical doctor who initially approached Ron's teachings with a healthy dose of skepticism.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
As a doctor, he's probably trained to look for scientific evidence,
Right.
not ancient wisdom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's so compelling is that Daniel, through his own experience and a 3-year medical study,
Wow.
became a firm believer in the power of detachment.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful endorsement from someone in the medical field. So these compartments are draining our energy and impacting our health.
Yes.
But how do we actually detach from them?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite as simple as just tossing them out.
Okay.
Ron emphasizes that detachment is an internal process.
Okay.
It's not about changing the external world or trying to avoid difficult emotions.
Okay.
It's about changing our relationship to those emotions.
Okay, so it's more about shifting our perspective rather than trying to force our feelings to go away.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ron describes it as learning to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, without getting caught up in their stories.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially in our fast-paced world where we're constantly bombarded with stimuli.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you just detach from thoughts and emotions?
It's definitely a practice.
Yeah.
It takes time and patience.
Okay.
But Ron outlines a very practical and accessible approach, starting with just 5 minutes of stillness twice a day.
5 minutes. That seems doable even for someone who struggles to sit still for more than 5 seconds.
The key is to find a quiet space where you can sit comfortably and bring your attention to your mental feeling.
Okay.
Ron teaches a simple technique of Kelee meditation.
Okay.
And as we practice this, we start to notice the stillness comes in.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Stillness, peace. Sign me up.
We realize that we are not our thoughts.
Okay.
We are the observer of our thoughts.
Okay, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
But how does simply observing our thoughts help us detach from them?
Well, when we observe our thoughts without judgment, we stop feeding them with our energy.
Yeah.
We're no longer identifying with them as me or mine.
Okay.
It's like watching clouds pass through the sky. We acknowledge their presence without getting caught up in their movement or form.
So it's like we're finding space between ourselves and our thoughts.
Yeah.
Allowing them to come and go without disturbing our inner peace.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And as we cultivate this practice, those compartments in the Kelee start to lose their grip on us.
Yeah.
The energy that was once being drained by those unresolved emotions starts to become available to us again.
This is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear more about the practical benefits. We touched on the physical health aspect.
Right.
But what other transformations did Ron and the seminar participants experience through detachment?
Well, one of the most striking examples comes from another participant, a professional surfer named Taylor.
A surfer.
Yeah.
That's not exactly the first profession that comes to mind when I think of detachment.
Right.
I imagine surfing requires a lot of focus and being very present in the moment.
You're absolutely right. And that's actually exactly what drew Taylor to Ron's teachings in the first place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was looking for a way to manage the intense pressure and mental chatter that comes with competitive surfing.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Especially during high-stakes events like the Triple Crown of Surfing in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you can imagine the pressure he's under.
So instead of trying to block out those thoughts and emotions, he learned to detach from them. How did that actually play out in his surfing?
Well, Taylor describes it as a shift from feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to feeling a sense of calmness and clarity, even amidst the chaos of a big wave.
Wow.
It's like he was able to tap into a deeper level of focus and presence, allowing him to ride the waves with more precision and grace.
That's amazing.
I know, right?
It sounds like detachment. Rather than hindering his performance, actually enhanced it.
It did.
It's like he was able to free up his mental and emotional energy to fully focus on the task at hand.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
And what's fascinating is that this shift in Taylor's energy was so noticeable. People commented on it.
What did they say?
They were struck by his newfound calmness and ease.
Wow.
Even in incredibly challenging conditions.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful testament to the ripple effect of detachment.
It is.
It's like Taylor's internal transformation created a more harmonious environment for everyone around him.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It really highlights how our internal state impacts not only our own well-being, but also the energy we bring to our interactions with others.
Yeah, it's like our energy becomes contagious, whether it's positive or negative.
That's for sure.
That's so interesting.
And speaking of contagious energy, let's circle back to Daniel, the doctor.
Yeah.
Remember how he was initially skeptical of Ron's teachings?
Oh, yeah, he seemed like a tough nut to crack. But he ended up not only embracing detachment, but also conducting a medical study on it. That's quite a turnaround.
It really is. And it speaks to the depth of his transformation.
Okay.
He went from feeling drained and disillusioned with his work to experiencing a renewed sense of purpose and joy. And it's important to note that Ron isn't advocating for denying or ignoring the challenges of a demanding profession like medicine.
Right, yeah.
It's about learning to find some space between ourselves and those challenges. So we can show up more fully for ourselves and others.
So it's not about pretending everything is fine, but rather about finding a way to navigate those challenges without being consumed by them.
Exactly. In Daniel's case, this shift in perspective allowed him to be more present and compassionate with his patient without absorbing their suffering on an energetic level.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like doctors are constantly touching the world of illness and pain, and that can take a toll on their own well-being if they're not careful.
For sure. And what's really exciting is that Daniel's 3-year medical study on Kelee meditation provided some fascinating insights into the link between detachment and physical health.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did his study actually reveal? Did he find a correlation between practicing detachment and improved health outcomes?
He did.
Really?
His study focused on measuring the impact of detachment techniques on stress levels, pain management, and the body's ability to heal.
Wow.
And the results were pretty remarkable.
So not only does detachment have anecdotal support from people like Ron, Daniel, and Taylor, but it's also starting to gain scientific validation.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's still a relatively new area of research, but the findings are incredibly promising and suggest that there's a lot more to discover about the mind-body connection and the potential of detachment to enhance our well-being on multiple levels.
This is all so fascinating.
I know, right?
But I have to admit, I'm still a bit fuzzy on the practicalities of it all.
Okay.
How do we actually identify those compartments in the Kelee and detach from them? It sounds a bit abstract.
Well, Ron's approach is actually very down to earth. It involves a combination of self-awareness and a technique he calls breaking the loop.
Breaking the loop. Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Essentially, it's about recognizing when we're caught in a cycle of negative thoughts or emotions, a loop, and consciously choosing to step out of it.
So instead of getting swept away by those negative thought patterns, we learn to observe them from a distance.
Precisely. And that's where Kelee meditation comes in.
Right.
By cultivating a habit of observing our thoughts and emotions without judgment, we find some space between ourselves and those thoughts. We realize that we are not our thoughts. We are the observer of our thoughts.
So it's like watching a movie. We can experience the emotions of the characters without getting lost in the plot.
That's a great analogy. And as we practice this, we start to recognize the patterns in our thinking. We notice the triggers that set off those negative loops. And we develop the ability to choose a different response.
So instead of reacting automatically to those triggers, we can pause, observe, and choose a more constructive path.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And that's the essence of breaking the loop. Interrupting those habitual patterns of thinking and behaving that no longer serve us.
Okay, that's starting to click for me.
Good.
But I imagine it takes a lot of practice to become aware of those loops.
It does. And to break free from them. It does. But the good news is...
Okay, what's the good news?
That even small steps can make a big difference. Ron emphasizes that consistency is key. He suggests starting with just 5 minutes of Kelee meditation twice a day.
That seems manageable, even for someone with a busy schedule.
Right. But what about those compartments in the Kelee? How do we actually detach from them once we've identified them?
That's a great question. It's like those compartments are all tangled up inside us.
And
we need to carefully detach from them to release the tension they're holding.
Exactly. It takes patience and gentle persistence.
So how do we actually go about detaching from your thoughts, so to speak?
Ron suggests starting by simply acknowledging the presence of the compartment without judgment.
So we're not trying to push it away or pretend it doesn't exist?
Right. It's more about bringing it into our awareness with a sense of curiosity and compassion.
Okay, so we acknowledge the compartment. What's next?
The next step is detaching from the emotions and experiences that are stored within that compartment. It can be challenging, but it's also incredibly liberating. Ron emphasizes that we don't have to relive the experience or get lost in the story again. It's more about observing those emotions and experiences from a distance, almost like watching a movie.
And as we do that, those emotions and experiences start to lose their grip on us.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like we're releasing the energy that's been trapped in those compartments.
Okay.
And as that energy is released, we start to feel lighter, freer, and more empowered.
This is all starting to paint a very clear picture of how detachment works on a practical level.
Good.
But I'm curious to hear more about the long-term benefits. What did Ron and the seminar participants experience as a result of practicing Kelee meditation consistently?
Well, one of the most striking outcomes was a profound sense of inner peace and joy.
Inner peace and joy. That sounds pretty amazing, especially in our world that's constantly bombarding us with stress and negativity.
Yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did they find that those feelings became more constant, or was it more like a temporary state of bliss?
That's a great question.
Ron actually addresses this directly in the seminar.
Okay.
He emphasizes that detachment isn't about achieving some permanent state of euphoria or disconnecting from the world entirely.
Right.
It's more about developing true freedom from within that allows us to navigate the ups and downs of life with more grace and ease.
So it's about learning to ride the waves of those emotions without getting swept away by them.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it highlights the fact that detachment is an ongoing practice.
I love that analogy. It makes detachment feel much less intimidating and much more accessible.
Yeah.
It's like we're all learning to surf the waves of our emotions.
Yeah.
And it's okay to fall off sometimes as long as we keep getting back up on the board.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one of the beautiful things about Ron's approach is that he emphasizes self-compassion.
Okay.
He encourages us to be kind to ourselves, to celebrate our progress, and to not get discouraged by setbacks.
That's so important.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the idea of doing it right or achieving perfection. But it sounds like detachment is more about embracing the journey, imperfections, and all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's about trusting the process, even when it feels challenging or uncomfortable.
Speaking of challenging,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about the benefits of detachment.
Right.
But let's be real.
Yeah.
This stuff isn't always easy.
No, it's not.
Right. What are some of the common challenges or roadblocks that people might encounter when they start practicing Kelee meditation?
Well, one of the biggest challenges Ron highlights
Okay.
is simply finding the time and space for stillness in our busy lives.
Our minds are addicted to distraction.
Right.
Yeah.
We're so accustomed to being constantly on the go, bombarded with stimuli, that carving out even 5 minutes for quiet reflection can feel like a monumental task.
It really can.
It takes a conscious effort to break free from that cycle of distraction and find some space for inner stillness.
Yeah, for sure.
He encourages us to start small, even just a few minutes a day.
Okay. So it's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
The more we practice stillness, the easier it becomes.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And just like any muscle,
Yeah.
it takes time and consistency to develop.
Another challenge I imagine people might face is resistance to facing those uncomfortable emotions and experiences stored in those compartments.
Yeah.
It's like, who wants to willingly dive into the stuff that's been weighing them down?
It's understandable to feel that way.
Yeah.
But Ron emphasizes that we don't have to relive those experiences or get lost in the story again.
Right.
It's more about observing those emotions and experiences from a distance with the sense of curiosity and compassion.
So it's not about wallowing in the negativity, but rather about acknowledging it and letting it go.
Exactly. And Ron suggests using Kelee meditation as an anchor to help us stay grounded in the present moment as we detach those compartments.
Okay. It makes detachment feel much less threatening and much more approachable.
Yeah.
I like that.
Another challenge Ron mentions is the tendency to judge ourselves when we inevitably get caught up in those negative loops.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to feel like we're failing at detachment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If we find ourselves reacting in old habitual ways.
I could definitely see how that could be discouraging.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm doing it again. I thought I was supposed to be detached.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ron emphasizes that self-judgment only adds to the suffering.
Okay.
He encourages us to be kind to ourselves, to remember that this is a practice, and that setbacks are a natural part of the learning process.
So it's like learning to ride a bike. We're going to fall off a few times before we get the hang of it.
Exactly. And the key is to keep getting back on the bike, to keep practicing, and to celebrate our progress along the way.
I love that analogy. It makes detachment feel much less daunting and much more like an adventure with its own ups and downs.
Exactly.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of detachment, what are some key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own lives?
Well, one of the most important takeaways is that detachment is a practice.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process of self-discovery and growth.
Right.
And it's okay to make mistakes along the way.
Absolutely. And it's about being kind to ourselves, celebrating our progress, and trusting the process, even when it feels challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
Another key takeaway is that detachment isn't about becoming emotionless or disconnecting from the world. It's about learning to manage our emotions in a healthier way.
Yeah,
So that we can experience the fullness of life without being overwhelmed by negativity.
for sure.
And it's about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to the world around us, even when things feel out of control.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. So as we leave our listeners to contemplate the art of detachment, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you most from our deep dive into Ron's teachings?
What really stood out to me was the emphasis on the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And the profound impact that detachment can have on our physical health.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fascinating to see how ancient wisdom is being validated by modern science.
Totally.
And it makes me excited to see what further research reveals about this powerful practice.
I completely agree. And for me, what really resonated was the idea that detachment is not about denying our emotions, but rather about learning to flow with the waves of life without getting swept away by the current.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's a beautiful and empowering concept that I'm eager to explore further in my own life.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, the journey to detachment is a lifelong adventure.
Yeah.
Embrace the process, be kind to yourself, and enjoy the ride.
Absolutely.